Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work in marketing. It was the mid 2000s, and I was finally getting the hang of the corporate world after spending my early 20s bouncing between retail jobs. The marketing department was small, just three of us crammed into a converted storage room with barely enough space for our desks and the ancient printer that jammed every other page. My colleague had a habit of treating me like his personal assistant, even though we were technically at the same level. He was one of those guys who had been there a year longer than me and acted like he owned the place. He would dump his work on my desk and expect me to drop everything to help him. The day before this incident, we had gotten into an argument about how to pronounce the letter H. I insisted it was AH. He swore it was H. I had actually looked it up in the dictionary during our lunch break and shown him the correct pronunciation. He still refused to admit he was wrong. He just waved me off and said the dictionary was outdated. That argument had left me in a mood, and I was still annoyed about it. So when he started pacing behind his desk the next afternoon around 2:30 p.m., dictating a PowerPoint presentation to me, I was already feeling petty. He wanted me to make it look professional while he rattled off bullet points about quarterly projections and market penetration strategies. Typical corporate nonsense that could have been summarized in an email. He had been working on this presentation for weeks, but left the actual creation of it until the last minute. The board meeting was scheduled for 3:30 p.m. That gave us about an hour to finish everything. Then he said it. He wanted an asterisk in front of every bullet point. I paused mid-click and looked up at him. I told him he meant asterisk, not asterisks. He stopped pacing and stared at me like I had just suggested the earth was flat. He insisted it was asterisk with an Rick sound at the end and explained it was a little star in case I didn't know what it was. I corrected him again, saying it was asterisk with a risk sound and a K at the end. He told me I was wrong and that it was asterisk. His voice was getting louder now. He turned to our other colleague, who sat in the corner trying desperately to be invisible during these moments. He asked our colleague if it was asterisk. Our colleague just shrugged and kept his eyes on his monitor. Smart man. He had learned early on not to get involved in our arguments. I asked if I wasn't wrong yesterday either and suggested I could fetch the dictionary again. He said there was no need and that it was asterisk, and that was the end of the story. He told me to just do it. He went back to pacing and checked his watch. I could feel the grin spreading across my face even though I tried to keep it neutral. I said I would do it with no problem. Then I asked him to clarify that he wanted an asterisk in front of every point and not an asterisk. He stopped and looked at me. He said yes very slowly, like he was talking to a child. I told him, okay, buddy. He went back to pacing and dictating while I pretended to type notes. But I wasn't working on the presentation anymore. I was on Google Images searching for something very specific. For anyone who doesn't know Asterix or Asterix the Gaul is the main character from a massively popular French comic series. He is a tiny Gaulish warrior with a winged helmet and a big mustache who goes on adventures with his big friend Obelix. The comics had been translated into dozens of languages and were everywhere in the 2000s. I had actually read some of them as a kid. I found the perfect image within 30 seconds. Asterix wagging his finger triumphantly in the air with a smug expression on his cartoon face. It was absolutely perfect for making a point. Multiple points, in fact. I carefully inserted the image in front of every single bullet point in the presentation. Where there should have been a simple asterisk symbol, there was now a small cartoon Gaul, looking incredibly pleased with himself. The presentation had 17 slides with an average of 4 bullet points each. That was a lot of asterisks. I even made sure to size the images properly so they were clearly visible but not so big that they overwhelmed the text. He was still dictating when I finished. I sat back and waited while he wrapped up his thoughts about customer retention rates and brand awareness. He seemed pleased with himself. He checked his watch again. It was 3:15 p.m. He told me to print it off because he needed to head straight into the boardroom. He said he wanted to get there a few minutes early to set up. I hit print and handed him the pages as they came out. He grabbed them without looking and started walking toward the door. He was already halfway there when he finally looked down at the first page. He stopped dead in his tracks. He asked what it was and guessed it might be a Viking. I kept my face completely neutral. I told him I was confused because it was Asterix and that he was a Gaul, not a Viking. I reminded him it was what he had demanded and admitted it was weird, but that he had been adamant about it. I also mentioned that I had double-checked with him to make sure. He stared at the pages, then at me, then back at the pages. He flipped through them quickly and saw that every single slide had the cartoon character on it. His face was turning red, and it clashed with his cheap tie. Our other colleague had now fully turned around in his chair to watch. He said I knew what he meant. His voice was shaking a little. I replied that he had been very clear about what he wanted and that he had even corrected me when I said asterisk. I reminded him that he said it was Asterix with Rix. I asked him if he wanted me to go get the dictionary so we could look up both words. Our other colleague was biting his lip trying not to laugh. He could see exactly what was happening. He told me to just fix it. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 3:20 p.m. I asked if he wanted asterisks now with a risk and a K. He didn't answer. He just turned around and walked back to his desk. He threw the pages down and sat heavily in his chair. I calmly opened the file and replaced all the Gauls with proper asterisk symbols. It took about 45 seconds. I hit print again and brought him the corrected pages. He snatched them from my hand without saying thank you. He finally made it to the boardroom at 3:35 p.m., 5 minutes late. Our boss was not happy about people being late to board meetings. I heard later that he had to explain why he was delayed. Apparently, he tried to blame it on printer issues. Our boss asked why he didn't just bring his laptop and present directly from there. He didn't have a good answer for that. The presentation itself went fine from what I heard, but everyone noticed he seemed flustered at the start. That was his second loss in 2 days. We never had another argument about pronunciation or punctuation after that. He started being a lot more careful about how he spoke to me. He also stopped dumping his work on my desk at the last minute. If he needed help with something, he would actually ask politely instead of just expecting me to drop everything. He even started double-checking things himself instead of just assuming he was right. Our other colleague told me a few days later that it was the funniest thing he had seen in the office in years. He said he had wanted to take a picture of the Asterix presentation but didn't want to make things worse. I've been married to my wife for 15 years now, and I can honestly say she's my best friend. We met in college and hit it off right away. She's kind, thoughtful, and an amazing mother to our 2 kids. But there's one thing about her that drives me absolutely crazy. She's a terrible passenger when I'm driving. It started years ago on our first road trip together. We were heading to the beach for a weekend getaway, and I noticed she would tense up every time another car got anywhere near us. At first, I thought it was kinda cute. Maybe she just wasn't used to highway driving. But as the years went on and we had kids and started making regular trips to visit her family, it became a real problem. My wife gets really nervous in traffic. She also gets motion sick on longer drives, so she needs to sit in the front seat. She tried taking medication for it once, but had some kind of allergic reaction. Her face broke out in hives and she felt terrible for days afterward. So now she just deals with the nausea naturally. Her family lives about 3 or 4 hours away from us. It's mostly highway driving, but we have to go through 2 major metro areas that always have heavy traffic. My wife doesn't like driving in that kind of congestion, so I always take the wheel when we visit them. I really don't mind driving. I actually enjoy it most of the time. What I don't enjoy is having my wife sitting next to me, acting like we're about to crash every 5 seconds. I'm not an aggressive driver. I've never gotten a speeding ticket. I've never been in an accident. I follow the speed limit and keep plenty of distance between us and other cars. But none of that matters to my wife. If a car half a mile ahead of us taps their brakes, she grabs the handle above her door and gasps like we're all about to die. She also puts her hand on the dashboard and tells me to watch out even when there's nothing to watch out for. Sometimes she'll suck in air through her teeth or make little worried sounds. It's incredibly distracting. I've told her so many times that her reactions actually make it harder for me to focus on the road. But she always says she can't help it, because she's nervous. This past New Year's, we were making our usual trip to visit her parents. The weather wasn't great. There was some ice on the roads and visibility was lower than usual because of fog. Traffic was moving slowly because of the conditions. I was being extra careful, giving lots of space to the cars around us, keeping my speed low, staying alert. But my wife was on edge the entire drive. Every single time I touched the brakes, she would tense up. Every time a car merged into our lane, she would grab the handle. Every time we slowed down even a little bit, she would let out these stressed sounds. I kept telling her she needed to relax and that her reactions were making it harder for me to drive safely. She would just deflect and say things like, maybe I should slow down more or maybe I should leave more space between us and the car ahead. I was already doing both of those things. I've been driving in winter weather my entire life. I grew up here. I know how to handle these conditions. By the time we got to her parents' house, I was exhausted. Not from the drive itself, but from dealing with her constant anxiety. My 14-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter were in the back seat pretty quiet the whole time. I think they could sense the tension between us. We had a nice visit with her family, celebrated the new year, ate good food, let the kids stay up late. But the whole time I was dreading the drive home. When we were packing up the car to leave, I made a decision. I told my wife she needed to sit in the back seat with our daughter. Our son would sit up front with me instead. She looked at me like I'd just slapped her. She asked me what I was talking about and said she always sits in the front. I told her I knew that, but she makes me too nervous when she's up there. I said I can't concentrate on driving when she's freaking out every 2 seconds. She said she doesn't freak out and that she's just anxious. I told her that her anxiety is distracting and that either she sits in the back or she drives us home herself. She started going on about her motion sickness and how she needs to sit up front or she'll get nauseous. I told her to take some NyQuil or something else that would help her sleep through the drive. She said she wasn't taking medication just so I could feel more comfortable. I told her then she could drive. She reminded me that I know she doesn't like driving in traffic. I said, well, I don't like having her freak out next to me the whole time, so she needed to pick one. Drive, sit in the back, or we're not going anywhere. She stood there for a minute looking like she wanted to argue more. But my father-in-law was watching, and I think she didn't want to make a scene in front of him. She got in the back seat without another word. The drive home was so much better. Traffic was lighter than it had been on the way there. My son sat quietly next to me, listening to music on his headphones. My wife didn't say a single word the entire trip. She just sat in the back pouting. When we got home, she told me she felt sick the whole way, but didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She said I humiliated her by making her sit in the back like a child, and that I should have been more considerate of her feelings. I told her I was being considerate of everyone's safety, including hers. I said if she can't control her reactions, then she can't sit up front, and that it's that simple. She's barely spoken to me since we got back. Every time I try to talk to her about it, she just gives me one-word answers and walks away. My son asked me yesterday if we were getting divorced. I don't think I did anything wrong. Was I supposed to just keep letting her distract me while I'm trying to drive safely? I had been working night shifts at a warehouse for 3 years, so being awake when most people were asleep was normal for me. That morning I got off work around 7 and stopped at the grocery store on my way home to grab some essentials. Coffee, bread, eggs, the usual stuff. The place was pretty quiet since it was still early. I was tired but in a decent mood. My shift had gone smoothly and I was looking forward to getting home, eating breakfast, and sleeping until the afternoon. I grabbed what I needed and headed to the checkout area. There were only 2 registers open and I picked the one with just one person ahead of me. The woman in front of me seemed normal at first. Middle-aged, dressed in a gray jacket and jeans with a cart full of groceries. She was unloading her items onto the conveyor belt while the cashier, a young guy who looked like he was maybe 19 or 20, scanned everything and made small talk with her. Everything seemed fine until it was time to pay. She announced that she had coupons. She pulled out what looked like a thick stack of paper from her purse and started going through them one by one. The cashier took them patiently and began scanning them, but after a few, the register started beeping and rejecting them. The cashier apologized and explained that the coupons had expired last month and he could not accept them. She asked him what he meant, insisting they were just coupons and he should scan them. He pointed out the expiration dates printed right on them, showing they had expired 4 weeks ago. She called it ridiculous and said she shopped there all the time and no one had ever told her that before. The cashier apologized again but explained that the system would not let him process expired coupons. He asked if there was anything else he could help her with. She stared at him for a long moment. I could see her jaw tighten. Then she started raising her voice. She told him this was unacceptable and demanded to speak to his manager. The cashier agreed and said he would call the manager for her. He picked up the phone at his register and paged the manager. While we waited, she stood there tapping her foot. I just wanted to pay for my stuff and leave, but I was stuck behind her. The manager showed up a couple minutes later. He was an older man with graying hair and glasses, and he looked like he had been through this kind of thing 1,000 times before. He asked what the problem was. She complained that the cashier was refusing to accept her coupons. The manager asked to see them. She shoved the stack at him. He looked through them quickly and nodded, confirming they were expired and explaining that they could not accept them. She accused them of trying to scam her, claiming she knew her rights and demanding they honor the coupons. The manager said he understood her frustration, but they had policies in place about expired coupons. He offered to help her find current promotions that might save her money today. She did not respond. Instead, she just stared at him. The manager waited a moment, then sighed. He told her she could complete her purchase without the coupons, or he would have to ask her to step aside so they could help other customers. That set her off. She started yelling about how she was going to report the store, how she would never shop there again, and how everyone who worked there was incompetent. The manager stayed calm and asked her again to either pay or move aside. She kept going, saying she would call corporate and get everyone fired. She said she spent thousands of dollars at this store every year and deserved better treatment. The manager tried to reason with her, but she would not listen. Then something weird happened. She suddenly went quiet. She nodded slowly and reached into her purse like she was getting her wallet. The cashier seemed relieved and turned away for just a second to pick up some bills that had fallen onto the floor behind him. And that is when she made her move. She jumped over the counter faster than I would have thought possible. Before anyone could react, she yanked the cash register drawer open and started grabbing handfuls of bills and stuffing them into her purse. I did not even think. I just moved. I reached over the counter and grabbed her by the shoulders, trying to pull her back. She thrashed and fought against me, trying to shove me away. I held on tight, wrapping my arms around her to stop her from running. She screamed at me to let go of her. She was surprisingly strong. She twisted and bucked, trying to break free. I could hear the manager yelling and other people in the store shouting. I kept my grip on her, determined not to let her get away. She started hitting me with her free hand, landing a few punches to my ribs. I tightened my hold and tried to pull her away from the register. Then I felt it, a sharp, burning pain in my left arm. It took a second for my brain to register what had happened. She had pulled a pocket knife from her jacket and stabbed me. I let go immediately and stumbled backward. Blood was already soaking through my sleeve. The pain hit me all at once and I dropped to one knee, clutching my arm. People around me gasped and jumped out of the way. She bolted for the exit, shoving past anyone in her path. The manager tried to grab her, but she pushed him into a display rack and kept running. I tried to get up, but the pain was too much. Someone, I think it was the manager, pressed something against my arm to stop the bleeding. Another person was on the phone with the police. A woman who said she was a nurse knelt down beside me and took over, holding pressure on the wound. She told me to stay calm and keep breathing. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. The police showed up maybe 10 minutes later. By then, I was sitting on the floor with my back against the checkout counter, holding a bundle of paper towels against my arm. One of the officers told me they had already caught her. She had only made it a few blocks before they tackled her to the ground in the middle of the street. She had been screaming and fighting the whole time. They arrested her right there in front of a crowd of people on their way to work. The officer said they found the knife and most of the stolen money still in her purse. An ambulance came and took me to the hospital. The cut was deep, but thankfully, it had not hit anything major. They stitched me up and gave me antibiotics and painkillers. The doctor said I was lucky it had not been worse. I had to take a few weeks off work to let it heal. My boss was understanding and told me to take all the time I needed. Physical therapy after that took a couple more months before I could use my arm normally again. The sessions were painful and frustrating, but I kept at it, but eventually it got back to how it was before. No lasting damage. I found out later that she was charged with robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and a bunch of other things. The total amount she stole was around $300. The store manager came to visit me in the hospital and thanked me for trying to stop her. He said the company wanted to cover my medical bills and give me a reward for my actions. They ended up giving me $2,000. For that and for stabbing me, she got sentenced to 12 years in prison. 12 years for $300. Stupid. Last year started off normally enough. My son had just moved up a grade and I was actually excited about it. The school he goes to is incredible. Everyone raves about it. It's one of those highly rated public schools where parents practically fight to get their kids enrolled. We had been there for years without a single problem. Then we missed Meet the Teacher night for the first time ever. I didn't think much of it, honestly. Life gets busy and I figured we'd meet his new teacher eventually. The school had always been so good to us that I trusted whoever they had in that classroom would be fine. 3 days into the school year, my son came home absolutely hysterical. I'm talking sobbing so hard he could barely get the words out. When he finally calmed down enough to speak, he told me his new teacher had been screaming at him. Not just raising her voice, screaming in front of the entire class. He said she does it to all the kids, that she goes out of her way to embarrass them on purpose. He told me about how she made another kid stand in front of everyone while she yelled about his messy handwriting, how she called out a girl for not knowing an answer and asked the class if anyone else was as slow. My son is the shyest kid you'll ever meet. He's never been in trouble, not once. He's the type who apologizes if someone else bumps into him. The idea of him being screamed at in front of his classmates made me want to drive straight to that school and lose my mind. I called a friend of mine whose kid is in the classroom right next door. She confirmed everything. She said her son had come home talking about how they can hear this woman screaming through the walls. Through the walls. That's not normal teaching. That's not even close to normal. She told me other parents had been complaining too, but the school kept brushing it off. The next morning, my son woke up sick to his stomach. He was begging me not to make him go to school. This is a kid who has always loved school, who gets excited about learning. Now he was terrified. I made him go that day because I needed to see this for myself. When I picked him up, he looked like he'd been through a war. His eyes were red and puffy. He wouldn't talk to me the whole ride home. That night, he threw up twice. The following morning, he threw up in the car line before we even got to the drop-off point. That was it. I was done. I walked into that office and demanded my son be moved to another classroom immediately. They tried to give me some runaround about how it's not that simple and how they can't just switch kids around. I told them they had until the end of the day to figure it out or I'd be having a very different conversation with people much higher up than them. The principal tried to defend her, said she'd been teaching for 15 years, that she had strong classroom management skills. I told him strong classroom management doesn't involve traumatizing 6-year-olds. He was moved by lunch. His new teacher is absolutely wonderful, patient, kind, everything a teacher should be. But the damage was already done. My son spent weeks trying to get back on track. He was jumpy, anxious, scared of making mistakes. He'd freeze up when his new teacher would walk near his desk, even though she was nothing but sweet to him. 3 days with that woman had seriously traumatized him. It took almost 2 months before he stopped having nightmares about going back to her class. I volunteer at the school regularly, have for years. I help with all kinds of things that the teachers need done: filing, organizing, making copies, laminating, whatever needs doing. My son still points that teacher out every single time he sees her in the hallway. He whispers her name like she's some kind of monster, which honestly she is. I will never forget what she did to him, how she made my sweet kid terrified to go to school. So here's where my petty revenge comes in. Whenever I'm volunteering and that teacher needs something done, it mysteriously never gets finished. I don't care if she's first on the list. Her stuff goes straight to the bottom. And somehow, I just never seem to have enough time to get to it. Need copies made for tomorrow's lesson? Too bad. Better come in early and do it yourself. Need materials organized for your classroom? Guess that's going to have to wait. Maybe you can handle it during your lunch break. Want something laminated? Well, there's just so much to do and your stuff keeps getting pushed back. You understand? Need folders put together for parent-teacher conferences? Sorry, but I ran out of time today. Guess you'll have to stay late. Want bulletin board materials cut out? Oh, I had to prioritize the other teachers first. They're so appreciative of the help. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's for her, it doesn't get done when I'm there. Period. She can do it herself after school or before class or during lunch. I don't care. She'll figure it out. The other volunteer parents have noticed. One asked me once why I never help her out. I just smiled and said, I must always run out of time when I get to her requests. They didn't push it. It's better than what I really want to do, which would probably land me in jail. Some days when I see her face, I have to remind myself that shoving someone down a flight of stairs is frowned upon. That an orange jumpsuit really isn't my color. I've been doing this for over 3 years now. 3 years of making sure her life is just a tiny bit harder. 3 years of tiny inconveniences that add up. And I'll keep doing it until my son graduates from that school. I see her getting frustrated sometimes, huffing around the volunteer room looking for her materials that never got finished, complaining to other teachers about how nothing ever gets done. Good. I hope it drives her crazy. I hope she stays up at night wondering why she's the only teacher who never gets help from the volunteers. I can't wait until he's old enough for me to tell him about this, to let him know that every single time she needed something done and it didn't get finished, that was me. That was for him. That was for every other kid. She is traumatized with her screaming and her cruelty. I did address it with the school administration, obviously. You know what they told me? That her teaching style works well for the more difficult students. That some kids need a stern teacher. I asked them what kind of difficult behavior a 6-year-old could possibly have that requires being screamed at and humiliated. They didn't have a good answer for that. Just kept saying she gets results. That test scores in her class are always high. I told them maybe that's because the kids are too terrified to fail. That fear isn't the same as learning. They just gave me sympathetic looks and said they keep an eye on the situation. Nothing ever changed. I didn't realize we had students that terrible in elementary school. What are we talking about here? 6-year-old gang members? But whatever. They can make their excuses all they want. She will get what's coming to her eventually. Teachers like that always do. But until then, I'm perfectly happy making her working life just a little bit more annoying. I started my clothing brand when I was 18, but I couldn't afford to manufacture everything myself. So I partnered with a company that handled production while I focused on the creative side and managing the business. It was hard work, but I loved it. Every pound I made went straight back into the brand, and I was finally starting to see some real progress. By the time I turned 19, I'd just launched my third collection. The designs were selling better than I expected, and for the first time I felt like this thing might actually work. I was posting updates on social media, getting orders from people I didn't even know, and genuinely proud of what I built from scratch. Then my cousin called. We'd always been close growing up, same age, went to the same schools, hung out at family gatherings, but we'd drifted apart over the past few years. She'd gone off to university while I'd stayed local to work on the brand. We still saw each other at Christmas and birthdays, but that was about it. Her call came one afternoon. I was working on designs for the next collection when my phone rang. She greeted me and said she'd seen my new stuff online and she told me it looked really good. I thanked her and said I was really happy with how the collection turned out. She said she wanted to grab some pieces and asked if I could send her 2 t-shirts and 2 hoodies. I told her sure, no problem, and that it would be £90 total. There was a pause on the other end of the line and she asked what I meant by 90 quid and said she wasn't paying for it. I asked her what she meant. She said we were family and that she should be getting it for free. I actually laughed because I thought she was joking, but the silence that followed told me she was dead serious. I explained that I couldn't give it away for free because I had to pay the manufacturing company for every single item. I told her even I didn't get them for free. She said I owned the company though. I explained that didn't mean the clothes magically appeared. I told her I paid for materials, production, shipping, everything. I said I wasn't making enough profit to just give away 90 quid worth of stock. She said that was bollocks and that I was just being tight. I told her I wasn't being tight and that I was running a business. I explained that if I gave free clothes to everyone I was related to, I'd be bankrupt in a month. She said other people give family discounts. I told her I could do a discount if she wanted, but I couldn't give it all away for free. I explained the manufacturing costs alone for what she wanted were like £70. She asked if I was seriously going to charge my own cousin full price. I said I was charging everyone the same price because that's how businesses work. She went quiet for a moment, then her tone completely changed. She told me, "Fine, don't bother then," and said some family I was. She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, genuinely confused about what just happened. I'd explained the situation clearly. I'd even offered a discount, but apparently that wasn't good enough. 20 minutes later, my mom came storming into my room. She asked me what the hell I said to my cousin. I asked her what she was talking about. She said my cousin had just called her in tears, saying I'd refused to help her out with my clothing brand. She said my cousin claimed I was being selfish and treating family like strangers. I explained the entire conversation, how she'd wanted 90 quid worth of clothes for free, how I told her I literally pay for every item myself, how I'd even offered a discount. My mom's face went from angry to absolutely fuming, but not at me. She said my cousin had told her I was refusing to give her anything at all, and made it sound like I was being cruel for no reason. I told her my cousin wanted 4 items for free and that I couldn't afford that. My mom said she knew I couldn't and that I was barely breaking even. She pulled out her phone and called my cousin right there in front of me. I could hear my cousin's voice on the other end, all sweet and innocent. My cousin greeted my mom all nicely. My mom told her not to dare greet her like that and asked what the nonsense was about demanding free clothes. My cousin said she'd just asked if I could sort her out. My mom said I was 19 years old running a business on my own and that I wasn't a charity shop. She told my cousin if she wanted my clothes, she needed to pay for them like everyone else. My cousin said we were family though. My mom said being family didn't mean she got to take advantage. She told my cousin I was working my arse off trying to make this work and that she was trying to guilt me into giving away stock I couldn't afford to lose. She said my cousin should be ashamed of herself. My cousin said she didn't mean it like that. My mom said yes she did and called out the fact that she'd rung her to try and get her to pressure me. She said that was manipulative and my cousin knew it. She told her not to contact me about this again. She hung up and looked at me. She said if my cousin gave me any more grief to tell her immediately. I thanked her, but I was still annoyed. She'd gone behind my back to my mom, tried to make me look like the bad guy, and twisted the whole situation. So I sent her a message. I asked her what that was about and why she'd called my mom and lied about what happened. The response came back almost immediately. She said she was sorry and that she shouldn't have done that. She said she was just frustrated. I asked her frustrated about what and reminded her I'd explained why I couldn't give it away for free. She said she knew but that she thought because we were family, I'd make an exception. I pointed out that when I explained why I couldn't, she tried to get my mom to force me to do it anyway. She said again that she was sorry. I told her she was only sorry because my mom called her out on it. She didn't respond to that. The next family gathering was awkward as hell. She avoided me the entire time, and I was fine with that. Other relatives asked about my brand and seemed genuinely interested. A few of them actually bought items at full price without complaining once. That's how normal people behave. My cousin eventually tried to act like nothing happened, but I kept my distance. I haven't properly liked her since. The whole thing showed me exactly what kind of person she was. Someone who felt entitled to my work for free and was willing to manipulate family members when she didn't get her way. The brand's doing well now. I've expanded to 5 collections and finally making decent profit. Every single person who buys from me pays the same price, family or not. And I sleep better at night knowing I built this thing properly without letting people walk all over me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.